This video will contain spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen chapters 93, 94, and 95, and Season 2, Episode 11, otherwise known as Episode 35. So, the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen is conducting a seance, and in this series, I'm going to be analyzing the story of the series as it airs, and, as a manga reader, comparing the anime to the manga to see what they pulled over directly, what they modified or expanded, and what they just straight up removed. So let's begin with the 11th episode of Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. First, I'll recap the plot and explain what chapters it covered. The episode begins with Yuji striking at the barrier with all his might, attempting to break it. Ino reacts in disbelief, comparing him to Nanami in terms of sheer striking power. Megumi tells Yuji there's not much point in wasting his effort in this way, as it's a very sturdy curtain, so they need to find a weak point to break through or there's no point. Yuji asks why, and Ino explains that typically the caster of a curtain is inside of it, so it can provide them protection. Yuji, however, explains how the caster of a curtain in Meiji Jingomae, he refers to it as Harajuku, which is the district that station is in, was actually outside of it to increase its strength. Ino walks himself through it logically, deducing that by staying outside the curtain, the caster makes it more likely for themselves to be targeted, but in return, the curtain is made stronger, which he compares to the Egg of Columbus, which I'll go into in the analysis section of the video. While Ino says that Yuji's punch not working would make sense if this were the case, Megumi chimes in to point out that to maximize this effect, the curtain's source of origin would have to be somewhere obvious as well. Yuji looks up in response to this statement, and we cut to the Shibuya Cerulean Tower, now at 10:01 p.m., an hour and a half after Gojo's arrival, and probably about 50 minutes or so after his sealing. We see as the three Saturday morning cartoon-looking ass villains from the end of the previous episode lie in wait atop the tower. Awasaka wonders if the sorcerers will be able to deduce their location as the source of the curtain, but Sweater Boy reminds him that the bottom of the tower is crawling with transfigured humans that would slow them down or perhaps even keep them from the roof altogether. As he says this, Nue suddenly appears behind them. Riding atop him is Ino, with Yuji along for the ride by way of a wire, gifted to Yuji by Maki, wrapped around Nue's leg. They clothesline the group in an attempt to rubber band them off the roof. Sweater Boy and Ogami manage to duck the wire because Awasaka took the initial hit, and he gets launched off the roof, as Ino dismounts Nue onto the roof and goes for the commissioned curtain nails. As Awasaka wonders if the three are aware of the other curtains, we see a flashback where Yuji shows the nail he broke earlier after defeating the grasshopper curse to Ino. He tells Ino and Megumi that Mei pieced together that the parameters of the curtain are imbued into the nail, so all one has to do is charge it with cursed energy to cast the curtain. Megumi deduces that that means they can just take out the nails first and then worry about the curse users afterwards. Back in the present, Ino heads to do just that, but notices two empty holes in the ground next to the one nail that is still present. He breaks it and notes the curtain is still there, so he looks around to try and figure out where the other two went, and sees them in Awasaka's hand just before he falls. Yuji leaps off the roof and coordinates with Nue to wrap Awasaka in the wire. Swinging from him like Spider-Man, Yuji yells for Megumi to recall Nue, and snips the wire from his wrist, using his momentum to smash through a window into the tower. Just as Awasaka figures out they mean to drop him, Nue disappears and he tumbles downwards towards an overpass. Back on the roof, Ino faces down Ogami and Sweater Boy, who she refers to as her grandson. Ino comments on how he needs to start paving his path towards becoming a Grade 1 sorcerer, and pulls on his mask. We cut to Megumi on the overpass as Yuji exits the tower, having dealt with the transfigured humans. He asks Megumi where their opponent is. Megumi shows him the man lying just a few feet away on the road. Megumi points out that he didn't see the man land, and his body is too clean for having fallen 41 stories, even if he's a curse user who could have reinforced his body. He yells at the old man to stop faking and get up. The old man rises, making a comment about the youth these days having no pity for the elderly. Megumi tells Yuji they don't have time to waste on him, and Yuji reassures him they won't. We cut to a flashback of Nanami and Ino sharing a meal in a yakiniku restaurant. Nanami asks Ino why he's so determined to have Nanami recommend him for Grade 1, claiming that with Ino's technique he could be a semi-Grade 1 in no time. Ino explains that it's important to him to do things the right way, especially when doing work like jujutsu sorcery, which can blur the line between good and bad so often. Since he's not super good at telling where that line is, he always asks himself what Nanami would do. Because of this, it wouldn't feel right to him to become a grade 1 sorcerer without Nanami's recommendation. We cut back to the rooftop, where Ino activates his technique, Auspicious Beast Summon, and summons number 1, Kaiichi. We actually saw a very brief demonstration of this ability in the movie, when we saw Ino fighting in Tokyo during the Night Parade of 100 Demons. It shoots out a striped cone that flies towards the two curse users. Sweater Boy picks Ogami up and dodges, but notices it seems to have a homing property, as Ogami starts chanting some black speech or something. Sweater Boy tosses her clear to safety as she keeps chanting and tries to tank Kaiichi. It rips a chunk out of his arm, and we receive an explanation regarding Ino's technique. Auspicious Beast Summon is a seance technique, wherein Ino becomes a spiritual medium, summons, and channels the abilities of 4 auspicious beasts: Kaiichi, Reiki, Kirin, and Ryu. Ino decides the best course of action is to eliminate these two as fast as possible, and get back to Megumi and Yuji to help them. Sweater Boy and Ogami engage in some cryptic conversation, and Ino summons Beast number 2, Reiki. We cut away to Megumi and Yuji's fight with Awasaka. Megumi notes that fighting the enemy isn't what's hard, so much as working together with Yuji. Despite landing some good hits, Awasaka retaliates by quick drawing a knife he had hidden in his abdomen binding and gives Yuji a good slash to the gut. Megumi reacts by using a toad to grab Awasaka and launch him into the skyway over the road. Megumi expresses concern for Yuji, but he reassures him that it's just a scratch. Awasaka comments on their level of spunk and claims they're definitely worth killing because they have such promising futures. Megumi says that Divine Dog's claws can even hurt a special grade, and Yuji says he hit him with everything he's got, and they both wonder why he's not hurt. Megumi makes a snarky comment about them not wasting any time, and Yuji has no comment. We cut back again to the rooftop, as Ino keeps smacking away at Sweater Boy, who's protecting Ogami from him as she continues her black speech recital. Ino notes that the Sweater Boy isn't any stronger than he looks, but something's up because he keeps putting his body on the line to protect the granny. Just as Ino decides he needs to get the let out before whatever plan they have comes to fruition. Ogami's cursed energy skyrockets, and Ino notes that something changed. She tells her grandson that they're all set, and Sweater Boy ingests something. Ino summons Kaiichi again in an attempt to go for the granny and stop their plan. Before it can reach her, she chants the name Toji Zenin, which is definitely not good. Suddenly, Sweater Boy catches Kaiichi, much to Ino's shock. Ogami asks how Sweater Boy is holding up, and he replies that it's the best one they've done yet, as his face starts to morph into everyone's favorite muscular evil papa. We cut to a flashback on December 7th, 1989. Gojo Satoru is born. We see as Ogami assassinates a man by shape-shifting into his daughter using her technique, explaining that her technique requires a dead person, so she killed the man's daughter to assume her form. We cut away to Awasaka, who is doing some real serial killer type shit. Ogami and Awasaka consider themselves to be free at that point in time, and we see as someone approach them to go after Gojo Satoru, as he already had a bounty on his head for over 100 million. We see as Ogami and Awasaka were out on a mission to try and kill Gojo, who at that point looks to be a child no older than 10 at the oldest, but potentially even younger, when they were overwhelmed by his sheer presence, as he was fully aware of them thanks to the Six Eyes. They claim that the balance of the world was altered due to Gojo's birth, and that caused them to have their freedom taken away from them in their later years. Yuji and Megumi are still kicking the shit out of this guy, and he continues to not be hurt. Yuji exclaims that the guy is more than just tough, and Megumi is piecing together that it must be the guy's technique. He thinks it might be damage nullification. Then he has an idea to rule it out. He calls out to Awasaka, claiming Gojo is in Shibuya and that he better leave the curtain behind and run. The guy blows it off, reminding him that they shouted out earlier that Gojo had been sealed, and that they wouldn't even be there if he wasn't. Megumi uses this to confirm that the man wouldn't be able to take on Gojo, meaning he can't have a technique as crazy as damage nullification. As the man gets ready to move in for the kill, Megumi has another idea, and unveils a new Shikigami we haven't seen from him before: Rabbit Escape. It summons a swarm of rabbits that overwhelm the man. As he's distracted, Megumi grabs Yuji and tells him they need to retreat and plan, as he's figured out the guy's technique, as Yuji holds onto an adorable rabbit. We cut back to the roof, and Sweater Boy has completed his transformation into Toji. Ino explains that they use the Granny Seance technique, which means the cryptic conversation earlier had to do with the two realizing Ino's technique was actually the same as hers, to transform Sweater Boy into a dead man, and knows just by looking at Toji that he's something else. He attempts to call number 4, Ryu, but before he can even do so, Toji has already snatched his mask off. As Ino remarks on his speed, Toji just pummels the shit out of the boy. We cut back to Awasaka, surrounded by rabbits. It's about this time that I started noticing Awasaka's vague resemblance to Yosemite Sam. He wonders if they'll try a sneak attack from behind the rabbits, when they suddenly disappear. He notices they're gone and wonders if they ran away, as Megumi drops Max Elephant on him. He manages to catch the elephant, and Megumi dismisses it. Awasaka taunts him, and he points him in the direction of Yuji, who casually tosses an entire car at the mustachioed man. Yuji and Megumi press the attack, with Yuji powering up for what Awasaka calls a desperate full swing. He explains that his technique is inverse, making strong attacks weak and weak attacks strong. He mentions that no one has ever been able to dodge his counter-attack following a desperate attack. We cut to a flashback where Megumi explains to Yuji that Awasaka's technique is inverse. He uses the fact that he's still not hurt, and how he reacted to Rabbit Escape, a support technique not meant for attacking, as proof. He assumes that there must be an upper and lower limit to what gets inverted, otherwise simple air resistance would be enough to kill him. This is why he wouldn't be able to go up against Gojo, who could output so much power so as to exceed his maximum limit and hurt him anyway despite his technique. Yuji and Megumi plan to strike him simultaneously with both strong and weak attacks, and Megumi adds that they need to be relentless so as not to let him catch on that they figured out his technique. Yuji lands his blow, which was inverted and so doesn't do anything to the man, but at the same time, a toad Shikigami strikes him in the stomach with its tongue, hitting the man hard enough to make him cough up blood. Then they go all-out attack on him before he can recover, throwing off his technique. He recovers enough to swipe at them and get them to back off, showing his anger at their cockiness. Yuji charges up another big hit, which Awasaka reacts to. He spins around to take a swing at Yuji, who dodges the attack, but stops his punch just before it connects. He finishes the punch at a different strength than he started, throwing Awasaka's technique off and absolutely demolishing him. Megumi compliments him for being better at refined attacks than he seems, and Yuji is surprised as the episode ends. With the recap out of the way, let's go over the main points of the plot. 1. Megumi, Ino, and Yuji deduce that the origin of the curtain must be on top of the Shibuya Cerulean Tower. 2. They engage in battle with the 3 curse users atop the tower. 3. Ino breaks one nail, but Awasaka makes off with the other 2 as he gets launched off the tower. 4. Ino stays atop the tower to take on Sweater Boy and Ogami, but Ogami summons Toji's body onto Sweater Boy's, and it's all over for Ino. 5. On street level, Yuji and Megumi take on Awasaka, deduce his technique, and defeat him. Now let's get into some analysis. First, let's talk about the Egg of Columbus. Ino refers to this when realizing curtains can be made stronger by staying outside of them and placing their origin in a conspicuous place. The Egg of Columbus refers to an apocryphal story, which just means that how true the story is can't be confirmed, so it could potentially be made up. The story, which dates back as far as the 16th century, which is the 1500s, goes that Christopher Columbus, upon returning from his trip that led him to America, was decried for having done nothing special, as finding new trade routes was inevitable. In response, he challenged his critics to stand an egg up on its own. They were unable to do so, despite the seeming simplicity of the task, and Columbus showed them up by breaking the egg shell by flattening it on one side and then standing it up that way. This was meant to showcase that something that seems simple isn't always so, and that even a brilliant or genius idea can seem like it should have been obvious after the fact. Ino makes this comparison because he sees the idea of a curtain being made stronger by casting it from outside and remaining in an obvious position to bolster its strength as a great idea that seems like it should have been obvious beforehand, but conventional wisdom would lead anyone planning to do that to consider it crazy. Considering this is Getont's plan we're talking about, it just goes to show how much of a crazy planner that guy is. Next, I'd like to do a little cultural dive into the beasts named in Ino's technique. This one's a little complicated and pulls from what is originally Chinese mythology that then spread to the rest of the East Asian cultural sphere. I'll be using the Japanese names for all of these, as they're the only ones I have any degree of confidence in pronouncing correctly. Ino's beasts are loosely based on the concept of the 4 holy beasts from China, with an alteration, which are themselves based on 4 auspicious animals/beasts that existed in Chinese mythology, and are similar to, but slightly different from, the 4 constellation symbols. Like I said, it's kinda complicated. For those unaware, the 4 constellation symbols are Genbu, Seiryu, Suzaku, and Byakko. These designs I'm representing each one with come from the Persona games, as these creatures are personas in those games. Each one represents a color, a cardinal direction, a season, and an element. So Genbu, also known as the Black Tortoise, which is depicted here with a snake tail, which it sometimes is shown as having, represents the color black, the direction of north, the season of winter, and the element of water. Seiryu, or the Azure Dragon, is associated with the color blue/green, hence azure, the direction of east, the season of spring, and the element of wood. Suzaku, or the Vermilion Phoenix, is associated with shades of red and purple, hence vermilion, the direction of south, the season of summer, and the element of fire. Byakko, or the White Tiger, is associated with the color white, the direction of west, the season of autumn, and the element of wind, originally metal in the Chinese system. So back to Ino's beasts. I think his technique is most similar to the 4 holy beasts, which as I mentioned are similar to the ones I just mentioned, but are slightly different, even though his technique is also itself unique and different from them. The main difference between the 4 holy beasts and the 4 constellation symbols is that the white tiger, Byakko, is replaced by the Chillin. If that name sounds familiar to you, it played a big role in the most recent Fantastic Beasts movie. We'll get to that in just a second though. For Ino's technique, Suzaku, the Vermilion Phoenix, is also replaced by Kaichi, which is based on a Chinese mythological creature thought to resemble an ox or goat, with a single horn on its head that can detect the innocent and guilty and uses its horn to skewer the guilty and eat them. This explains why it vaguely resembles a horn and has a homing capability. Ino's number 2, Reiki, refers to what can literally be translated into English as the spirit turtle, which is the more general Chinese mythological creature that Genbu, the black tortoise, originated from. Given that this creature is typically thought to have control over water, it makes sense that this technique seems to allow Ino to coat his body parts in water to use for various purposes. Number 3, Kirin, is the one named after the Chillin, and effectively allows Ino to dull his own sense of pain by inducing intracerebral doping. Ino didn't use this ability, and we only learn about it from an after-chapter page of an upcoming chapter, but I just wanted to include a basic description of it here for completion's sake. Finally, number 4, Ryu, is named after the Chinese dragon, again the more general creature from which Seiryu, the Azure Dragon, originates from. It appears to charge Ino's hand with electricity of some type, but he was interrupted before we got to see it in use. Now, the technique is named Auspicious Beast Summon because each of these creatures is thought to be an auspicious omen, meaning they signify something with their arrival or appearance. Kaichi represents the coming of justice as a creature that can detect the guilty. Reiki represents longevity, and so can be thought of as the coming of immortality. Kirin is thought to appear with the imminent arrival or passing of a sage or important ruler. Finally, Ryu is thought to represent simply power, because of course it does, it's a dragon. Next, just a little mini, tiny, very short Juju stroll. I just wanted to show the street level view where Yuji and Megumi fight Awasaka. Finally, let's hit the in-between pages of these chapters in the manga. After chapter 94, Akutami provides us with a page showing that the whole grading system for curses wasn't ever really that important, as it's very inconsistent. He says the grasshopper curse, Kogai, is a semi-grade 1 because it can use Jujutsu, even though we don't see any kind of technique from it, and Mei says it has more to do with its ability to use human language. After chapter 95, we get a character profile for Ogami. It says she likes young men, she's a junior member of the Boy Idol Agency fan club, and that Sweater Boy is not her real grandson, but someone she kidnapped and falsified their relationship, and that she has several grandchildren this way. After chapter 96, we get a character profile for Awasaka. It says he was an only child, and then tells a lie about him becoming a curse user to take care of his mother and treat her well, which it points out is the kind of lie he says without a second thought. Finally, after chapter 97, we get a 2-page typed afterword, this was the last chapter in volume 11, addressing the pandemic, which had just started at the time this volume came out in Japan in May of 2020, and how Akutami feels bad for creating such a dark story only to have the world thrown into a dark period. Despite that, he says he hopes everyone can enjoy the story, and mentions that he didn't know how to respond when his father, who had recently started reading his manga, asked him if Toji and Okotsu are modeled after him. And that's my episode recap and story analysis for the 11th episode of the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen. Make sure to subscribe and turn on bell notifications if you want to be here as soon as possible each week, as I put out new videos for each episode as it airs. And feel free to drop a comment with suggestions as to other videos you might like to see, such as character analysis videos or explanations. Thanks for watching.